Happy Tuesday. We are here for Tea with Kim, Tuesday Tea with Kim. And that is where we talk about the tea, right? We're going to talk about health tea. And I have been on the phone all morning. I had sort of a list of things that needed to get done, and none of it's getting done because I'm answering a lot of questions. So I haven't prepared anything for today. Like, I don't have anything. I usually think about it. I usually have something written out so that I stay on target, but I haven't had a chance to do that today. I've been hit the ground running, and I've just been running ever since. So a couple of things that have come up. One that just came up. So I have a health coach, and she has a little guy that has had gut issues his whole life. I want to say he's 5. I think that's right. I think he's 5. Anyway, he's had gut issues his whole life, and she does not have a pediatric functional medicine practitioner where she lives. She has someone who is integrative. So I am not throwing any shade. I just want the people that I know, that I reach with what I do, to understand that that can be a really good thing. Like, that can be amazing. That's someone who uses traditional practices like medications, antibiotics, those kinds of things, but also recognizes that in order to treat some chronic things and preventative and to really gain health, like to thrive instead of just surviving through life, that they're using some functional medicine practices. A lot of that really means that they're able to order functional medicine tests. And here's where it gets tricky. That's a really good thing. That's someone that like can do a lot for you. Someone that and someone that knows what you're doing functionally and knows what you're doing in your traditional medicine, how you're treating yourself. It's great that that person is the same. However, they need to, if they're calling themselves an integrative practitioner, they really do need to be integrative. And instead of reaching for that antibiotic to treat everything, that they need to consider functional ways to do that. So in this example, my friend, her little boy has strep in his has a strep infection, has an ear infection, and she thinks that he has strep in his throat. So he also, they found out, has strep in his gut. Now, strep in the gut, which is not an uncommon finding, needs to be treated a very special way. Because it creates, strep actually creates this, something that we call a biofilm around itself, so that traditional, even antibiotics, don't break through that biofilm and they don't actually kill the offender. So you might be asking, okay, so he's got strep in his throat. Is that how he got strep in his gut? Not necessarily. You can have strep in your gut and never have had strep. It's an opportunistic bacteria. And when your gut is not functioning normally, meaning that you're not digesting your food, you're not absorbing your nutrients out of there, your gut isn't moving things through like it should. The barrier where you have this mucus layer over the cells of your gut, and you have these tight junctions like Velcro that hold those cells together, that create this barrier where what you ingest in your food never comes into contact with your immune system, which is right underneath of that one cell layer thick. You can have, that can be disrupted by toxins in our food, toxins in our environment, stress on the body, sugar, processed foods, undigested food, meaning that you don't have that digestive power to break down your food. So instead of going across the cell membrane, they're actually going in between the cells. So they're creating these openings. And so now anything and everything that barrier would normally keep out, it allows in, and it stimulates your immune function. It stimulates your immune system. So now your immune system is fighting food or fighting bacteria that it should never come into contact with because that barrier isn't intact. So it's a big deal. And they really have to recognize that, and they have to appreciate what it is, what they have the power to see with these functional tests. They have to know how to treat them, and they have to know how to read them, and they have to know how to treat them functionally. So I hope that everybody finds an integrative practitioner that does a little bit of both, so that you have everything all wrapped up with a nice little bow on top, and your one practitioner knows both sides of how you're trying to get healthy and how you're treating your health. That isn't always the case. So you really have to protect yourself. You have to advocate for yourself. You have to advocate for your family. You have to advocate for your kids. So that's the first thing, because that's top of mind. That's what what my friend is going through right now. Second thing is that I get a ton of questions about probiotics. And one of the things that I teach in my program that really helps to fortify the gut and get the gut back on track, so that your hormones are on track and you're able to produce the energy that your cells need. You're able to detox yourself and then go back to supporting the gut. Like, it's just this big metabolic loop. That's something that I teach in my program, but I'm going to share a little bit here. And there are things that you have to do to the gut before you just start throwing in probiotics, because your gut, if it's dysfunctional, and I'm thinking that maybe it is, and that's the reason that you're reaching for the probiotic anyway, right? So if it's dysfunctional, that probiotic isn't going to survive. It's not going to do well. Like it's not the panacea. It's not the do all, end all, and be all for gut health. It has its place, but its place is not first in line. Its place is like fourth in line. And what you have to do first is that you have to make sure that you are getting your body in that rest and digest mode. You have two ways that your nervous system functions: sympathetically, and that's fight or flight, and then parasympathetically, which is that rest and digest. That's where you're calm, that's where you're relaxed, that's where you just feel happy and you digest your food really well. So you need to get into that mode before you actually start eating. You need to chew your food well. And then we're not even talking about what's in your food yet, right? We're talking about all the things, like the lifestyle things that you have to do in order to help your gut thrive. Then you have to make sure that you have enough intestinal fire, and that intestinal fire is going to be what helps to digest your food. First part of digestion is chewing your food. Second part of digestion is that gastric acid. If you're on proton pump inhibitors, those kinds of things, if you just are that person that doesn't have a lot of gastric acid, then you might really be struggling in this area. And that's where that getting in that rest and digest and chewing your food is even more impactful, because you need that extra boost because you don't have that gastric acid. So you need to do something about that, replace it in some way. And then your gastric acid starts a whole cascade where you actually start to release pancreatic enzymes that help you to further digest your food. And you also release bile. And bile is going to help you to break down fat that's in your diet. And we're not even going to vilify fat right now, because fat is important in your body. And so if you don't have that gastric acid, then you are not going to release your pancreatic enzymes. You're not going to have good bile flow. So you can have actually sludge build up in your bile system, in your gallbladder, if you have a gallbladder. And what all of this is preparing to do is that it's actually digesting your food. And then you have to digest your food, because now that food is going to need to be absorbed across your cell membrane of your gut cell that's in your small bowel. And if it's not the right particle size, meaning that your proteins aren't broken down all the way to the size of amino acids, and your fat isn't broken down into those little tiny droplets of free fatty acids or monoglycerides, and your carbohydrates are not broken down into molecules of glucose, they're not going to be absorbed across your cell membrane. So they can go on through the whole transit and never be absorbed. And that way you're going to be very, I don't want to say calorie deficient, because we absorb calories easier than anything, but you're going to be nutrient deficient. So all the nutrients that were in that food, you're not going to get them. And then, if it's not being broken down into that small particle size, then it's going to find a way across, and it's going to go in between the cells, and then it comes into contact with your immune system, and it starts this whole immune cascade where there's a lot of stuff. Your body's on alert. And so if that happens over a long period of time, guess what happens? Then your immune system gets tired. Your immune system gets worn out. It has to regenerate itself. And how does it do that? By all the nutrients that you absorb, right? That you're feeding those cells, like you're feeding every other cell in your body. But if you're not digesting calories, you're not digesting nutrients, then those cells are struggling. You don't have energy for them to do their job. So you see how everything is related. So this is the environment that you have going on where everything is struggling. So if you just throw probiotics in there, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to make a difference in what you have going on, because you really have to start at the beginning, and you have to do a couple of things before that. So I got to ask a question about probiotics. And many probiotics are out there on the market because they're easy to grow. They're not necessarily ones that are going to benefit you. There are, you really do want to look for some that have diversity, meaning that they don't just have one kind of probiotic, that they have lactobacillus and they have bifidobacterium. Those are the two main ones that you need to have. Colony forming units isn't always the best bet. I would go for diversity and a smaller colony forming unit, CFUs. That just means how many billions of bacteria. I would go with diversity before I went with just one that had like even 50 billion CFUs. And then there has to be some timing in when you're taking this. So I recommend that you take it at night, as you're settling down for the evening, as it's starting to get dark outside, because that's when your body actually is repairing itself and it's doing its work. Or that you take it in the middle of your meal so that it has a better ability to survive, because that gastric acid is diluted down, so that it's not going to kill it, and that it also, the pancreatic enzymes and the bile is also diluted down a little bit, so that it's not going to kill the bacteria in your small bowel either. You also want to be sure that if it's not refrigerated, that it doesn't need to be refrigerated, first of all, and that it should say, if that's the case, it should say shelf stable. And that just means that it has some protective packaging or something, some delivery system that's going to allow it a better chance of surviving through the stomach and through the small bowel, to actually get to where it needs to get to, which is the lower end of the small bowel and in the colon especially. That's really where we want our microbiome to have a lot of numbers and to have a lot of diversity. And that's another thing that, going back to my first friend whose kid has been on antibiotics multiple times because his gut's just leaky, and it's allowing everything to come into contact with his immune system, that it's just worn out. And that's probably why he has strep, and that's probably why he has an ear infection, because his immune system is so busy fighting off what's coming through the gut that it's worn out. And so he's susceptible to other things. And that's a clue. If you have gut issues and you also are getting everything that comes down the pike, like everything that comes through the neighborhood, you get it, that tells me right there that your gut is probably leaky, and it's probably wearing out your immune system. So we'll stop here. I know I feel like a broken record sometimes, because this is something that we've talked about before, but I always want to give the best information, and not everybody hears everything. And so maybe I'll say it in a different way that makes sense to you where it hasn't made sense to you before, or something clicks and you're like, that makes perfect sense. So I am here. I'm happy with all the questions. Thank you for that. It gives me ideas on what people really do need to be educated about. And that's really what I want to do. Like, I have an agenda, right? I have things that I would love to talk to you about, but if that isn't what you're struggling with, then I'm not really being useful to you. And that's what I really want to do. I want to give you the information that's gonna do something for you. So what I always ask and what I always hope is that if something that I have shared with you today resonates with you, or if it helps you in some way, I want you to share this video, or I want you to share the information. I want you to tell somebody about it. You know, your friend might ask you and say, hey, what probiotic are you taking? And then you can let them know that, hey, it's not all about the probiotic. You got to start at the beginning, and you got to get yourself in that rest and digest mode. So, all right, guys, I will see you tomorrow for Wealth Wednesday. It's going to be a little bit late because nope, actually it's going to be on time. I will see you for Wealth Wednesday tomorrow. And if you have any questions, or if there's anything that you'd like for me to cover, then just send me a message. All right, see you soon.